Sir, she grew up with me in the orphanage, the maid cried to the Mafia boss. The city never truly slept. Under a sky forever tinged with ash and violet, lanterns flickered along narrow streets, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets to anyone who dared to listen. The people who lived here knew fear as a constant companion, but to some, fear was power, and none wielded it as tightly as Don Cale, the Mafia boss whose name was spoken in hushed tones and whose presence seemed to darken every room he entered. In the palace at the city's edge, a building of towering spires and blackened stone, Leora moved silently. She carried a tray of glasses glinting with amber liquid, her footsteps light against the polished marble floors. The palace was her world now, but once it had seemed impossible to imagine such grandeur. Leora had grown up in the orphanage with Serene, a girl whose laughter had been brighter than the sun, whose hope had been unshakable even when the world seemed determined to crush them both. The orphanage had been a place of cold walls and thin blankets, of whispered prayers and hunger that gnawed quietly at their bellies. Leora had always taken it upon herself to protect Serene, to shield her from the harshness of life as best she could. Even as children, she had sensed that something about Serene was different, something fragile, yet unbreakable. Now, years later, they were separated. Bray was gone, taken by forces unknown, and Leora was left in the palace, serving the very man whose reputation could crush a person without a second thought. Yet, despite the fear that clung to every corner of the palace, Leora felt a strange pull toward Don Cale, a tension she could neither explain nor resist. Cale was in his private study when she entered, a room lit only by the fire that danced on the hearth. The flames cast shadows across his sharp features, highlighting the faint scar that ran along his cheek. He was reviewing papers with meticulous attention, but when Leora stepped into the room, his gaze lifted, cold and calculating, yet curious. "Bring the glasses here," he said, his voice low, measured. There was no warmth in it, but there was command, an authority that made her hands steady despite the tremor in her heart. Psh! She approached, and Cale's eyes lingered on her face as if trying to see something hidden beneath the surface. Leora felt a shiver run through her. She had never known a gaze that could cut so deeply without touching, that could make her feel exposed and strangely safe all at once. "You seem familiar," he said, almost to himself. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Leora's chest tightened. She had heard whispers among the staff, rumors that Cale had powers beyond human comprehension, that he could sense truths and lies alike, that he could see the weight of secrets carried silently. But now, standing before him, she wondered if the stories were more than just stories. I serve where I am needed, sir," Leora replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Gee." She placed the tray on the table and bowed slightly. Cale watched her, and for a long moment neither spoke. Outside, the wind howled against the stone walls, carrying the faint scent of rain and smoke. Leora's mind drifted to Serene, to the memory of her friend's laughter echoing through the halls of the orphanage, to the promise she had made long ago to protect her at all costs. Then the truth came crashing forward, unbidden and impossible to ignore. "Sir," she began, her voice trembling slightly. Desperation. She looked directly into Cale's eyes, seeing the faint flicker of something unreadable. She grew up with me in the orphanage." Cale's expression shifted. Just for a moment, a crack in the mask of calm authority. He set down the papers he had been reviewing and leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Explain," he said, each syllable deliberate, commanding, and yet tinged with curiosity. Leora swallowed hard, the memory of Seren's face, of her fear, of her hope, pressing against her chest. Seren, she was taken. They They plan something terrible. I, her words caught in her throat. She had no proof, only intuition and fragments of overheard conversations. But she had to make him understand, had to make him see that the girl she had promised to protect was in danger. Cale studied her silently, the room heavy with unspoken questions. Race. The firelight reflected in his eyes, making them seem almost unreal, as though they could see through the walls, through the floors, into the very heart of the city itself. "Why should I care?" he asked finally, his tone soft but edged with danger. "Why should I involve myself in the fate of a girl I do not know?" Leora's heart pounded. She had expected this. But she had expected the coldness, the authority, the danger that came with every word from him. But she also expected to feel fear, a deep, gnawing fear that made her want to flee. Instead, she felt determination. "Because she is innocent," she said quietly. "Because if no one stops them, she will be lost." "And I cannot let that happen." The silence that followed was suffocating. Cale leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, fingers steepled. "You speak with courage," he said. "Or foolishness." "Perhaps both. But tell me, why do I sense a bond between you? Why do I feel it in the air around you, as if your heart carries a weight meant only for me to see?" Leora felt the weight of his gaze, and it threatened to overwhelm her. She had spent her life hiding her feelings, hiding her fears, hiding her loyalty, yet here was a man who seemed to see all of it without effort. "Because I care," she whispered. "I care for her. She is like family. And if she is in danger, I will do everything to save her." Cale's expression softened just slightly, a motion so subtle that it could have been mistaken for shadow. "And what would you sacrifice for her?" he asked, his voice almost gentle, almost human. Leora's hands clenched at her sides. She did not hesitate. "Anything," she said firmly. Even if it means risking myself." For a long moment, Cale said nothing. Then, slowly, he rose from his chair, his towering figure framed against the flickering firelight. He moved closer, each step deliberate, and Leora felt the room shrink around them. "Very well," he said finally. "If you are willing to risk yourself, then perhaps we can find her together." Relief surged through her, mingled with fear. She did not know why this man, feared by all, would agree to help. Why he would trust her with his time and his resources. But she sensed that their fates were now intertwined, bound by more than just circumstance. Cale turned away from her, moving to a map spread across the table. "The city is dark, Leora. Danger lurks in every corner, and those who wield power do not do so lightly.
You must understand, this is not a game."
One wrong step and she, or you, could be lost forever."
"I understand," Leora said, her voice steady.
"I've never known anything else." The night stretched on as they planned, poring over maps, listening to whispered reports from trusted informants, tracing the path of those who had taken Serenane. The city outside seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what was to come, while inside the palace two unlikely allies began to form a bond forged in necessity and tempered by mutual understanding. And then, as the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, a servant ran breathless into the room, eyes wide with fear. "Don Cale!" He glances around in desperation. It's them. "They've moved Saren!" Leora's heart lurched. She had known this moment would come, had feared it every waking hour. but hearing it aloud made the danger real. She turned to Cale, her voice trembling. "We have to go. We have to save her. Now!" Cale's eyes met hers, sharp and unwavering. "Bah. Yes," he said simply. "But know this, once we step into this shadow, there is no turning back. The path ahead is dark, and it will test us in ways we cannot imagine." Leora swallowed, feeling both fear and determination surge through her. Brad's. She had grown up in shadows, had learned to survive in a world that showed no mercy, but this was something more. This was a world where loyalty, love, and courage could collide with darkness itself, and she would not falter. As they prepared to leave, Leora looked back at the empty halls of the palace, at the fire that had warmed the room and cast shadows across the walls. She thought of Seren, of the promises made in the quiet hours of their childhood, of the bond that had never broken. And she whispered, almost to herself, "I will find you, no matter what it takes." The city outside waited, silent and watchful. Somewhere in its heart, darkness stirred, ancient and hungry. And somewhere in the shadows, enemies moved, unaware that their prey had allies in the most unexpected of places. For Leora and Cale, the journey had begun. And though the road ahead was shrouded in danger, one truth remained unshakable. The bond forged in an orphanage, between two girls and a man of shadows, would be the spark that challenged the darkness itself. And as the first light of morning brushed the rooftops, the words left Leora's lips with quiet determination. "Sir, she grew up with me in the orphanage, and I will not let her be lost." The streets of the city were a labyrinth of shadows, twisting alleys, and whispered dangers. Lanterns burned low, their light flickering across walls covered in ivy and soot, casting a strange glow over puddles left by last night's rain. Leora followed Don Cale through the twisting streets, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Every step they took was careful, calculated. Every shadow could hide a threat. Cale moved with the grace of a predator, his eyes scanning the darkness, alert to the smallest movement. His presence was commanding, silent, and terrifyingly precise. Leora felt the pull of his gaze even when he did not look at her directly, a reminder that she was walking beside a man who could see beyond masks and lies. She did not flinch. Breath. She would not let fear control her. Not now. Not when Seren's life hung in the balance. They stopped in front of an old warehouse at the edge of the city. Breath's windows were broken, its walls blackened by age and neglect. Cale crouched, studying the entrance, while Leora caught her breath. "This is where they've taken her," he said quietly. "The ones who have her are not just thieves or criminals. They are followers of an old power, one that whispers in darkness and bends the will of those who are weak."
Leora swallowed hard.
She had sensed something strange when Seren was taken, something that went beyond ordinary danger. Now, hearing Cale speak of it, her fear deepened. "What kind of power?" she asked softly. Cale's eyes, sharp and unyielding, met hers. "A curse," he said, "a force that can twist a person's soul, make them do things they would never choose."
It feeds on fear and despair, and it grows stronger when those feelings are shared.
Run. She thought of Seren, of the girl she had promised to protect, and of the laughter that had once filled the orphanage. That light, that joy, could be consumed if she did not act quickly. "Brother." Cale opened the door quietly, and they slipped inside. The air was thick with dust and shadows, and the faint scent of incense lingered, marking the space as more than just a hideout. Leora could hear the faint hum of chanting, a low, almost musical rhythm that made her skin prickle. They moved silently through the corridors, Cale leading with confidence, Leora following with cautious steps. Every corner held a risk, every doorway a potential trap. And yet, despite the fear, she could not stop herself from studying Cale. There was something almost human behind his cold, commanding exterior, something vulnerable that he did not show to the world. And she felt a strange pull toward it, a longing she did not fully understand. Breaths. They reached a large chamber at the heart of the warehouse. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long, dancing shadows. In the center, a girl sat bound by chains, her eyes closed, her head bowed. Leora's heart skipped a beat. It was Saren. Saren, Leora whispered, rushing forward, only to be held back by Cale's steady hand. Wait, he said softly. Observe first. Understand what we are dealing with. One wrong move and she could be lost forever. Leora clenched her fists. She had always been impulsive, driven by emotion and loyalty, but Cale's restraint forced her to pause. She studied the girl in chains. Saran's hair fell in dark waves around her face, and even in her helpless state, there was a quiet strength about her. Leora felt a pang of sorrow. How had they allowed this to happen? Cale knelt beside the chains, inspecting the bindings. They were marked with strange symbols, etched into metal with an unnatural precision. These are not ordinary chains, he murmured. They are enchanted. They feed on her fear, her doubts, and her longing. We must break them carefully, or the curse will awaken fully. Leora's chest tightened. She had never seen magic before. Not like this. It was beautiful and terrifying, alive in a way that made her heart ache. She wanted to rush forward to free her friend immediately, but Cale's presence held her back, like a silent promise that patience now would save them all later. "A help," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Tell me what to do." Cale studied her, his expression unreadable.
You must focus. You must be strong.
By your will can shield her from the curse, but only if you can withstand it yourself. Fear is contagious. Ow! Doubt can destroy us all. Leora nodded, forcing herself to breathe slowly. She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered the orphanage, the night she had spent comforting Saren, whispering promises that no matter what happened, she would always protect her.
That memory, pure and unwavering, gave her courage.
Together, they worked. Cale chanted in low, steady tones, his voice a rhythm that seemed to push back the darkness. Leora focused on her bond with Saren, on the light they had shared as children, and the chains began to weaken, their metal twisting under an invisible force. But the moment of triumph was short. A shadow moved in the corner, fast and silent, and Leora sensed danger before she saw it. A figure stepped into the candlelight, a man whose eyes glowed faintly with unnatural power. "You should not have come here," he said, his voice a low hiss echoing in the chamber. "She belongs to the darkness now. You cannot save her." Cale's eyes narrowed. "You forget who you are speaking to," he said calmly, though a dangerous edge sharpened his words. "This girl will not fall to you while I stand." The man laughed, a sound that made the air vibrate with menace. "You think you can defy me? You're only one man, and this girl is bound by more than chains. She carries the weight of destiny, and you cannot alter it." Leora felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to step back. She clenched her fists and looked at Saren, who stirred slightly, her eyes opening to reveal fear and hope mingled together. Leora whispered softly, "Hold on. I'm here. I won't let you face this alone." Cale stepped forward, his presence growing almost like a shield around them.
"We will see,"
he said, his voice low but resolute. You underestimate the strength of loyalty, the power of love that is not bound by fear. The man's eyes flared, and the shadows in the room seemed to stretch and twist, reaching toward them like living things. Kale moved with practiced precision, intercepting the dark energy with gestures that seemed almost instinctive. Leora felt the air hum around her, a pulse of power that pressed against her chest, and she realized she was not just a witness, she was part of this battle. Her own courage, her bond with Saren, fueled the resistance against the darkness. The struggle was tense. Each moment, a delicate balance.
One misstep could spell disaster. And yet, in the chaos, Leora felt something shift between herself and Kael.
In the midst of danger and the heat of fear and determination, there was trust forming, fragile but undeniable. She began to understand that he was not merely a man of power. He was a man who had known darkness, and yet he chose to stand in the light, however faint. Finally, with a surge of combined will, the chains around Saren twisted and shattered, clattering to the ground.
She gasped, trembling, but alive.
Leora rushed forward, pulling her into a protective embrace.
Leora, Saren whispered, tears running down her cheeks.
Despair. You came, you saved me. I promised, Leora said softly. I will always protect you. Kale watched them, his expression unreadable, though a small flicker of something like relief crossed his features. This is only the beginning, he said, his voice low. The curse is not gone. Its shadow lingers, breath. And the ones who bound her will not forgive failure. Leora looked up at him, fear and determination mingling in her gaze. Then we fight, she said firmly. We fight until she is safe, until it is over. Kyle nodded slowly. First. Good. Then we begin. Outside, the city's shadows seemed to retreat slightly, though they never disappeared completely. The darkness had been challenged, but not defeated. And somewhere in the twisting alleys and forgotten corners, enemies watched, plotting, waiting for the next moment to strike. Leora realized that the path ahead would be treacherous, filled with choices that could break hearts and test loyalty beyond measure. Brash. And yet, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, she felt a spark of hope. For the first time in years, she was not alone in facing the shadows. Kale's presence, firm and unwavering, offered a strange comfort, even as it brought tension she could not ignore. And as the first light of dawn broke across the city, painting the rooftops in pale gold, Leora felt the weight of the journey ahead settle upon her shoulders. It would demand courage, loyalty, and perhaps even love in its quietest, most unexpected forms. But she was ready. She had to be. For Saren, for herself, and for the fragile bond forming between her and the man who moved through darkness with a heart that she could just begin to see. As they slipped back into the alleys, preparing to leave the city behind for now, Kale spoke softly, almost to himself, yet meant for Leora to hear. Trust is a dangerous thing, he said, and yet it may be the only weapon we have that darkness cannot touch. Leora's lips pressed into a thin line. She did not speak, but she understood. Trust, loyalty, and courage. These were the tools they would need to survive the trials ahead, and she would wield them with every ounce of strength she possessed. Somewhere, hidden in the dark corners of the city, the enemies were planning their next move. But Leora, Kael, and Saren were ready, or as ready as anyone could be, in a world where shadows and curses waited patiently for their chance. And in that fragile moment of calm, as dawn's light spilled over the stone streets, Leora knew one truth with absolute certainty. They would face the darkness together, no matter what it demanded, no matter how deep the shadows ran. because loyalty, love, and courage could shine even in the blackest night. And the night was only beginning. The city slept uneasily under the blanket of night, its alleys thick with fog that carried whispers of secrets and long-forgotten fears. Inside a secluded safe house, Leora tended to Saren, who still trembled from the ordeal at the warehouse. The candlelight cast a warm glow on their faces, but the shadows in the corners of the room were long and heavy, reminders that the darkness they had just escaped was not gone. It was only biding its time. Saren's eyes, wide and bright even in fear, met Leora's.
I thought I would never see you again, she whispered, her voice trembling.
I was so scared. Leora squeezed her hand, her own voice soft yet steady. I promised I'd protect you. Breaths. And I always keep my promises. No matter what happens, I will not let anything harm you. Saren smiled faintly, the light of hope flickering in her eyes. But Leora's gaze shifted toward the door, toward the shadows that seemed to press just beyond the candlelight. The danger they had just faced was only a single wave in a storm that had yet to come. Kale entered the room silently as always, his presence filling the space with quiet authority. Leora felt a pull in her chest that she could not name. Fear mixed with admiration, tension mingled with something dangerously close to trust. Kale's eyes met hers, sharp and unreadable, and she felt the weight of his attention like a hand pressing lightly on her heart. We cannot linger, he said, his voice calm, but carrying an unspoken urgency. The curse that bound her is not gone. Its roots are deep, and its shadows stretch far. Those who seek to use it will come for her again. We must prepare.
Leora nodded, setting her jaw. Then we fight. Whatever it takes.
Kale studied her for a moment as if weighing the strength of her resolve. You have courage, he said quietly.
And loyalty. Traits that many possess in name, but few in truth.
Do not mistake that for recklessness. There will be choices ahead that will test both. She swallowed, her mind racing. She had never been afraid of hard work or danger. But Kale's words carried weight. But this was not just a physical threat. They were dealing with forces that could twist hearts and minds, that could manipulate fear and longing until they became chains stronger than steel, and yet she felt a strange certainty. Desperation. She would not turn away. She could not. Over the next days, Kale trained Leora in ways she had never imagined. It was not only about combat, but about control. Control over fear, over doubt, over the emotions that could make them vulnerable to the curse. Leora learned to steady her breath, to sharpen her senses, to move like shadows within shadows. Kale's instruction was firm, precise, yet beneath it lay a subtle care, a recognition of the strength she already possessed. During these sessions, the tension between them grew, an invisible thread pulled taut with every glance, every touch, that lingered just slightly too long. Leora felt it like a current beneath her skin, electric, dangerous, and yet impossible to ignore. Kale, for his part, seemed aware of it too, though his expression remained unreadable. His thoughts locked behind walls she could only glimpse through fleeting moments. One night as they patrolled the city's rooftops, the wind cold against their faces, Leora spoke quietly. Kale, why do you do this? Why protect me? Or Saren? You don't owe us anything. Kale's eyes scanned the streets below, then lifted to meet hers, sharp and steady. Because sometimes power comes with responsibility, he said. Because I have known darkness and do not wish it to consume those who are innocent. Because perhaps there is something in you that reminds me of what I lost long ago. Leora's heart skipped. She did not fully understand his words, but she felt their weight. You're not Just a man of power, are you? She whispered. No, he said quietly. I am a man shaped by it, but there is more beneath the surface. More that I rarely allow anyone to see. Their journey continued as the days bled into nights. They tracked the movements of those who sought to harness the curse, uncovering layers of intrigue, betrayal, and dark alliances. Every encounter tested them, not just physically, but emotionally. Leora began to see flashes of Kale's humanity in moments when he thought she was not watching. A softening of his eyes when Serene smiled, a quiet sigh when he realized the burden of his own past had not yet fully healed.
And yet, danger lurked always at the edges of their path.
One evening in the abandoned ruins of a cathedral outside the city, they confronted a follower of the Dark Power, a man whose presence twisted the air like smoke curling through fingers. He raised his hands, and the shadows around him seemed to pulse, feeding on fear and doubt. Kale moved first, his body a blur of precision and strength, intercepting the shadows with gestures that seemed almost instinctive. Leora followed, her own movements less practiced but fueled by determination and a deep, unyielding loyalty. Together, they formed a fragile alliance, balancing power and trust in the midst of danger. The man's voice echoed through the ruins. You think your loyalty can protect her? You think your courage is enough? She is destined for darkness, and you cannot change that. Leora stepped forward, her voice strong and clear.
No!
We will not let fear control us. We will fight. We will protect her, and we will not fail. Kale's eyes met hers, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. In that moment she understood the depth of the bond forming, not just between her and Saren, but between her and him. They were tethered by shared purpose, by trust, and by the silent acknowledgement that each of them carried burdens the other could not fully see. With a surge of combined will, they drove the man back, dispersing the shadows he had conjured. He retreated into the darkness, but his words lingered, a reminder that the curse's reach was long and its patience deep. Afterward, they rested on the cathedral steps, the city visible below, lights twinkling like stars. Leora's hands were bruised, her muscles aching, but her heart thrummed with adrenaline and relief. Saren slept safely nearby, her breathing steady for the first time since her capture. Kale remained silent for a long while, staring into the night. Finally he spoke, his voice soft but commanding. You are stronger than I anticipated, and yet strength alone will not be enough. There will be moments when you must choose between what is right and what is necessary, between loyalty and desire. Between love and duty. Leora looked at him, confusion and curiosity mingling in her gaze. Love? She asked softly, almost afraid to voice it. Kale's eyes flickered, a shadow passing over his features. Yes, he said quietly. Even in the darkest times, the heart can guide us or betray us. Inspiration. Do not underestimate the power of what lies within you. She swallowed hard, realizing that the tension she had felt between them, the magnetic pull, the silent understanding, the unspoken longing, was more than just fear or admiration. It was something dangerous, something that could shape their choices as much as any curse or shadow. The night stretched on, and Leora found herself alone with her thoughts, watching Kale and Saren from a distance. She realized that the path ahead would demand more than courage and loyalty. It would demand trust, sacrifice, and perhaps even the willingness to confront her own heart. As dawn approached, a soft mist settled over the city. Leora sensed that they were being watched, that unseen eyes followed their every move. The curse, the shadows, and their enemies had not vanished. They had only grown silent, waiting for the right moment to strike. Cale returned to her side, his expression unreadable. "Rest," he said simply. "We move again at first light. The challenges ahead will test all of us, and we must be ready. Together." Leora nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. But beneath it was something else. A quiet determination, a spark of hope that she had not felt in years. They had survived the first trials, and now they would face the next. She glanced at Saren, sleeping peacefully, and then at Cale, whose gaze lingered on her for a moment too long. She did not fully understand the emotions stirring inside her, but she felt them acutely. Admiration, tension, longing, and trust woven together in a delicate, dangerous thread. And as the sun began to rise, painting the rooftops and towers in pale gold, Leora knew one thing with certainty. The battle against darkness was far from over, but they would face it together. Pale, Saren, and she, bound by loyalty, courage, and something deeper still, would challenge the shadows that sought to consume their world. But somewhere, in the hidden corners of the city, the enemies whispered and plotted. The curse was patient. The darkness was cunning. And soon, Leora and Cale would be forced to confront choices that could change everything. Not just their lives, but their hearts. As they prepared to leave the cathedral, Leora felt a chill run down her spine, a premonition of the trials yet to come. She looked at Cale, whose expression was unreadable, and whispered softly to herself, "No matter what comes, I will not falter." Cale's hand brushed hers for a brief moment, almost accidentally, yet enough to send a shiver through her. "Brace." His voice was quiet, almost a murmur. "Nor will I." The city stretched before them, a maze of light and shadow, promise and peril. But the storm of fate was gathering, ready to test the bonds they had forged in fire, fear, and loyalty.
And in that moment, Leora understood the truth. To face the darkness, she would need more than courage.
She would need trust, love, and the strength to confront the deepest fears of the heart itself.
The night was far from over.
The city had changed under the weight of darkness. Shadows stretched longer now, and even the brightest lanterns seemed dimmer, as if the night itself had grown hungry. Leora stood atop the palace balcony, the wind tangling her hair and carrying the scent of rain and smoke. Saren was safe for the moment, but the shadow of the curse still lingered, unseen but ever present. Cale stepped beside her, silent as always, his eyes scanning the streets below. Leora felt the familiar pull of tension, that mix of fear and trust that had grown between them over countless nights and battles. She glanced at him, wondering how a man so powerful, so dangerous, could inspire such protection and such longing in her heart.
The time has come, Cale said finally, his voice low but steady.
The ones who seek the curse know we have freed her. They will not wait. They will strike tonight. Leora's jaw tightened. She had expected this moment, had feared it, had prepared for it, but knowing it was coming did not dull the surge of fear that pressed against her chest. "Then we stop them," she said firmly, "whatever it takes." Cale's gaze lingered on her, sharp and unreadable. "Whatever it takes," he repeated, almost as if testing the weight of her words. As night fell, they moved through the city, shadows among shadows, tracking the forces that had once bound Saren. The streets seemed alive, whispering secrets, carrying the faint hum of magic that pulsed through the city's veins. Leora felt it too, a pull that matched her own heartbeat, reminding her that this was no ordinary battle. They arrived at a secluded courtyard at the edge of the city, a place of cracked stone and overgrown ivy. There, waiting for them, were the ones who had orchestrated Saren's capture, their leader cloaked in darkness, his eyes glowing faintly with unnatural power. "You should not have returned," he said, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "The curse cannot be undone."
She belongs to it now. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between the enemy and Leora and Saren.
"You underestimate loyalty and courage," he said, his voice steady, carrying authority that seemed to push back the shadows around them. "And you underestimate love." The man laughed, a sound that made the air shimmer with menace. Breath. "Love cannot protect her. It cannot save her from destiny. It can only destroy those foolish enough to try." Leora's heart pounded, but she did not step back. She felt Kale's presence beside her, a shield and a challenge all at once. She reached for Saran's hand, drawing strength from the girl's courage and hope. "We will not fail," she whispered. "We cannot." The battle began with a clash of light and shadow. Kale moved with practiced precision, intercepting magical strikes and deflecting attacks with ease that seemed almost impossible. Leora followed, her movements fueled by determination and the bond she shared with both Kale and Saren. Break. Each step, each gesture was a choice, a declaration that they would not yield to fear. The enemy's magic surged, feeding on doubt and hesitation. Shadows twisted into shapes that whispered the darkest fears of the heart. Leora felt the pull, the temptation to flee or surrender. But she held fast. She focused on the promise she had made, on the light she carried for Saren, on the trust she had begun to place in Kale. In the midst of chaos, Kale and Leora found a rhythm, their actions synchronized, as if their hearts and minds moved in unison. The air shimmered around them, charged with power and intent. Leora realized then that the bond they had formed, the trust, the tension, the unspoken understanding, was a force stronger than the darkness they faced. Breath, for her part, found strength in her own way. Though bound by fear and the lingering curse, she held her ground, focusing on the bond she shared with Leora. Together they became more than victims. They became a force of resistance, uniting courage, loyalty, and hope against the encroaching shadows. The enemy's power reached its peak, a towering wave of darkness aimed to consume all three of them. Kale stepped forward, raising his hand to meet it. The energy struck him, and for a moment it seemed as if the shadows would win. But Leora did not hesitate. She reached out, placing her hands near his, channeling her will, her loyalty, her love into the force that sought to destroy them. Pay. The darkness faltered. The shadows shrieked, twisting and recoiling, unable to contain the strength of their combined hearts. Kale's eyes met Leora's, sharp and intense, and she felt a connection that went beyond words, a shared understanding that they were stronger together than apart. With one final surge, the enemy's magic shattered, the courtyard exploding in a flash of light. The man staggered, his power broken, his influence over the curse severed. He fell to his knees, defeated but alive, a reminder that evil could endure but could also be challenged. The silence that followed was heavy but not oppressive. Leora collapsed to her knees, breath ragged, eyes wide with relief and exhaustion. Saren rushed to her side, hugging her tightly. "You did it," she whispered.
"We're safe. You're safe," Leora corrected softly, tears running down her cheeks. "We're safe." Kale stood a few steps away, his posture relaxed now, though his gaze never left them.
Slowly he approached, and for the first time in years, his expression softened, revealing the man beneath the armor of power and fear.
You were remarkable, he said quietly, voice almost gentle.
"Not just for your courage, but for your heart. That is what made the difference." Leora looked at him, words catching in her throat. She had learned so much on this journey. About fear, about loyalty, about strength. But what she felt for Kale was something new, something she could not fully name. We did it together, she said softly. Kale's eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment, the tension between them softened into something fragile and unspoken. Together, he echoed. The dawn broke over the city, painting the rooftops in pale gold, washing away the shadows that had clung so tightly. Leora, Kyle, and Saran stood together, a trio forged in fire, fear, and loyalty. The curse was broken, the enemy defeated, but they knew that life would never return to the simplicity it once had. They had been changed, transformed, by the trials they had faced. Kale spoke again, his voice steady, carrying the weight of unspoken emotion. The city will not forget this night, and neither should we. There will always be shadows, always be those who seek to control or destroy. But we have learned something powerful, that light, loyalty, and courage can overcome even the deepest darkness. Fear. Leora nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She glanced at Seren, whose eyes shone with gratitude and newfound strength. We will be ready, she said. Together we can face anything. Kale's gaze lingered on her, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his features before it was replaced with calm authority.
You have changed me, he admitted quietly, almost to himself. And perhaps
I have changed you as well. Leora's heart skipped. She did not know how to respond, but she felt the weight of his words in her chest and the quiet pull of connection that had grown between them. She could only nod, understanding without speaking that some truths were felt, not voiced. Pray. As the city awoke beneath them, the three of them stood on the balcony overlooking the streets. The wind carried the scent of rain, of earth, of renewal. The trials they had faced had been severe, but they had emerged stronger, bound not just by circumstance but by choice, by courage, by hearts that refused to yield. Saren spoke softly, breaking the silence.
I don't know how to thank you, Leora. You saved me. And Kale, you...
You saved our throw! Kale's eyes flipped to Leora, and a faint smile touched his lips. No, he said quietly.
We saved each other, all of us.
That is the power that darkness cannot touch. The three of them remained there for a long while, watching the city, feeling the quiet triumph and the fragile peace. Leora realized that life would never be simple, that shadows would always linger. But she also understood that they had something far stronger than fear or curse. They had each other. Finally, as the sun rose higher, painting the city in gold and warmth, Leora felt a quiet determination settle in her heart. The journey was not over. There would be challenges ahead, choices that would test them, dangers that would return. But they had survived the darkest night, and in doing so had discovered strength, courage, and a bond that could withstand even the deepest shadows. Kale turned to her, his eyes holding a depth she had never seen before. The world may fear us, he said softly, but together we are unstoppable. Leora's lips curved into a small smile, the tension of fear and uncertainty finally giving way to something like hope.
Then we face it, she said, her voice steady.
Together. The wind whispered through the city, carrying the promise of renewal and the echo of trials overcome. In that moment, Leora understood something profound. The heart, when guided by loyalty, courage, and trust, could illuminate even the darkest path. And as the city bathed in the morning light, the three of them, Leora, Kale, and Seren, stood ready, transformed, and bound by the trials they had endured. The darkness would return, but they would be ready. For in the end they had discovered the greatest power of all, that even in a world filled with shadows, light could prevail when hearts stood together. And so, the night ended, the city awake once more, and the bond between them unbreakable, forged in courage, loyalty, and the quiet strength of hearts willing to fight for what they loved.